Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to today's Reddit Quickie from the subreddit HFY, called Billy Bob's Space Trucker, Chapter 17, written by Legal. The link to the original will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Emily had tried to catch up with Billy Bob, but she couldn't find him in the mass of people moving through the station. She returned to the Cultural Dance Center to see if she could warn him before things got started. She saw some fillers standing in the crowd, but didn't see the squad that she'd noticed earlier. All sorts of species were here, talking and waiting for the event to begin. She looked around, trying to see where the competitors waited between the sets, but she only saw the doors at the back that were guarded. Cursing softly under her breath, she looked around to try and find the event organizer. Spotting the bank chair with the date slate and the earpiece. "I'm looking for my friend. He said he's competing tonight. Can you show me where to go so that I can talk to him?" The bank chair just stared at his data slate. "Sorry, dancers can't be disturbed before the program begins. Each set will come out and dance and return to the chambers if they advance to the next round." Emily sighed and then figured all that she could do was wait and hope for the best. She pressed through the crowd to find a table near the edge of the dance floor. Most of the crowd were still standing and talking, so she figured that she could get a seat early. After a few minutes, the lights dimmed and brightened as the crowd started to find seats, all stand around the area. The bank chair, wearing some of the strange black and white suit, stepped out into the center of the dance floor. "Esteemed species of all varieties, welcome to tonight's cultural dance tournament. We've got an impressive selection of dancers tonight, and even one last-minute entry that should prove very interesting. For those of you who are attending this for the first time, our panel of judges will announce the genre or theme of the song the dance teams must choose. Then, in a predetermined order, they'll come out and dance. They're ranked according to skill, difficulty, and flair. Those who continue on to the next round will return to the preparation room until the next round. Please, I must ask you to refrain from distracting the dancers. This is a very serious tournament, after all. Applause and cheers are allowed, however. As usual, this music is taken from a rather interesting and barbaric culture that has more variations of music than we've encountered before some such young species. Please, enjoy yourselves." With that, he walked off the stage and everyone got quiet. She could see the judges sitting on the platform to the side of the dance floor, while everyone who couldn't get a seat stayed close to the edges. Slowly, the strange orb Billy Bob had recognized dropped from the ceiling, spinning around as it began to shine all across the room. There was a murmur of surprise before the music began to play, and the announcement came on. "The first numbers from the last-minute entry who's never competed before. Performing a free choice song, please give him a warm welcome to our first contestant, Billy Bob, Space Trucker." Billy Bob strutted out onto the back door and onto the dance floor when the music began. Emily wasn't sure why, but he was wearing a yellow hat that looked rather rigid and some sort of orange vest over a red shirt. She was wearing those familiar blue jeans, but he also had some sort of belt with the strange implements tucked into it. Then the song began. "Young man, there is no need to feel down." He began to stomp, clap, and twist with the song, and over all the crowd began to nod at the beat. But when the song began, the chant, some sort of chorus, he began to move his arms in time with the music, and form symbols that her translator told her matched the start of each of the letters. The crowd murmured in surprise as he could match up the symbols with the chant so quickly and began to cheer out. The judges nodded at that, scribbling on their data slates. Emily was watching the fillers in the crowd, however, but she noticed that they were nodding and bobbing with the music more than anyone else. This wasn't an ambush, they were simply here to enjoy the music. She let out a heavy sigh to relief and relaxed in her chair, able just to enjoy the music. It was nothing like the stuff Billy Bob listened to when he was driving, but she figured it was some sort of old ritual song, or the sort. Then the song slowly faded away, then Billy Bob waved, and then the crowd cheered for the first timer. He saw Emily and grinned, quickly moving over to her table. "Not bad, huh?" Yes, very good, Billy Bob. They turned then and watched the other dance teams perform their first song. It was no less than 2 filler teams, and each with 5 dancers. One team was clearly better, but both were good. Next was a team of 4 onnets, the insectoids with 4 arms, 4 legs, and the banketeers hired as guards. These seemed to be on a break. They performed something called the hokey pokey. They looked a bit stiff, but obviously they tried their best. Emily was surprised to see the pair of grislins march out, however. Their exosuits decorated in some sort of glowing light displays. They normally would never step foot on the black market station, considering their species' strict moral codes. This must be an exception. They started dancing something called the robot, which Billy Bob muttered was cheating. Near the end of their performance, though, one of the exosuits stopped, and there was a hissing and a pop as it malfunctioned. The other grislin tried to finish the dance alone, but the judges were shaking their heads. It was pretty obvious when the judges announced that the grislins were out that they weren't impressed. So the grislin dragged the malfunctioning suit off the dance floor as Billy Bob nodded and he headed back to prepare for the next song. The lights came back up when the crowd was already talking. Emily had many of them murmur about how surprised that they were to see that one creature had entered on his own. Could he really be expected to perform so many dances as the lead act and keep impressing people? Emily just smiled behind her mask. They certainly get to know Billy Bob and his endurance soon enough. And then the lights dim and raised to announce the next challenge that was about to begin. We will now witness a series of dances using songs that tell historical tales of the culture's past. The judges announced. The music began and heavy with drums and some sort of instruments that Emily hadn't heard before. Billy Bob emerged from the door wearing a set of black pants, strange boots and a red shirt, and a giant black fuzzy thing on his head that she didn't understand. He didn't walk down the strange though. Instead he moved in an odd way, kicking one leg ahead with the other while keeping his arms crossed. By the time he got to the dance floor, she couldn't believe how low his body seemed as he kicked out with his legs in a strange dance. And then the singing finally began. There lived a certain man in a Russian long ago. Emily gasped as Billy Bob began to kick out one leg and then he tossed his arms out. Or would switch between balancing on his toes on either foot as he kicked out with his other leg. The balance he was displaying was unheard of amongst the species that she knew, not to mention the strength that it had required to support his body with just the toes while squatting like that. That strange chant in the background as he kicked out, "Ra, Ra, Rasputin." The story had to be some sort of legend. There was no such way a person could survive the things that the singers said were being done to him. But then again, the humans seemed to be very hard to kill. Maybe this was some sort of inspirational song then, about becoming even harder to kill than normal. Finally, the song ended as Billy Bob extended out a hand and kicked with both legs at the same time before bringing them back up and standing up straight. The crowd cheered out, unable to believe what they'd witnessed. Billy Bob was breathing hard, but he was still smiling as he stepped over to Emily to watch the other teams. The first Phyllis team came out after him, with some sort of song about a crazy lady named Ma Baker. Billy Bob frowned as he saw their costumes. The Chicago Cubs, that's a baseball team, you fricking idiots, shaking his head as they performed an acrobatic, very flexible style of dancing that the Fleckos were known for. It lacked the sheer strength and endurance Billy Bob's crazy leg dance, but it was quite good as well. The next Phyllis team came out with the strange hats that seemed rather large and stiff, but not like the one that Billy Bob had earlier. The strange blotchy pants and vests. The hell are they trying to be? Cowboys? Jesus, Billy Bob muttered as the song began. This here's a story of Billy Joe and Bobby Sue. Emily looked up at Billy Bob. No relation, but it's also the wrong time period for this song. Seriously. Your people seem to have a lot of songs about robbing people. It's sort of a trend. The fillers were a little more awkward than the team that came before them, but they weren't bad either. After they finished, the Arnott's came out, having painted themselves green, but were wearing a strange robe like dresses. She looked at Billy Bob, who shrugged a little. The song began, singing about some sort of terrible creature named Godzilla as Billy Bob slapped his face with his palm. They think Godzilla was a Japanese, so they're wearing kimonos. Jesus Christ. Shaking his head as he watched, they stomped around, seeming to mimic the creature that was being sung about. But it wasn't as impressive as the fillers or Billy Bob. Once they were done, the judges conferred and announced the Arnholtz were out. It seemed that they agreed with Emily's take on the dancing. Now to show these people the real freaking cowboy, Billy Bob muttered and walked to the back as the lights came on. The Arnholtz chittered happily as Emily realized that the guards were just thrilled that they made it to the second round. She giggled a little at the thought that they had no idea that they dressed up and just winged it. Human music was very catchy and it made the people want to dance. The crowd was talking, and now the most of the buzz was about Billy Bob, which made Emily smile. She had to agree with the murmurs spreading through the club about how it seemed impossible for him to have done that strange leg dance, but now that they knew why he'd entered the dance on his own. The fillers could jump around and do acrobatics, but he was able to show extreme balance and endurance all at once. The simplicity of his moves somehow made them more impressive. Soon the lights flickered and everyone quieted down, and the judges spoke again. For the next set of contestants had to do some research. They had to pick a song that was more about rural life, or about involving work, or time after work. The song started right away and a voice rang out, "Good time." Billy Bob emerged from the strange outfit. Billy Bob's jeans had returned to some strange pointy boots with intricate carvings, and a jacket that had strange frills in it. He also had one of those hats that the fillers had before, but his looked much more suited to his head. When he started to dance, she recognized part of it as a strange dance that he'd done to intimidate the fillers back at the refueling station. His thumbs were tucked into his belt, and this time to stomp and shifted us to the beat, twisting and putting his hands out to clap before tucking them back into his belt. Unlike the look of serious concentration from before, he had a big grin on his face. The song seemed to be singing about good times after long weeks of working, so maybe it held a special meaning for him that she had no idea. She was impressed with his ability to keep his dance set to the series of mental lines, though, working the same forward and backward and side to side around the same central position, like some sort of, line dance? Near the end of the song, he pulled a hand from his belt to take off his hat, waving at it and danced with more flourishes at the end of the song with a high note. Once more, the crowd cheered and he stepped away to the side, looking a little flushed as he was lightly sweating. So many dancers, back to back, and was starting to wear him down, but he looked ready for more. He watched the first fillers team come out onto the dance floor with jumpsuits, which made him frown. Then the song started with a line and a lone voice. "I want my own TV." He noticed the back of the jumpsuit said "moving service" and shrugged a little as money for nothing started. But then they began to move like they had before, spinning on the ground and demonstrating their agility as he groaned. Break dancing to money for nothing? That's freaking sacrilege, even if the costume is closer this time. Emily just glanced at the human grumbling about his competition. When the next song came on, they were wearing white shirts with black stripes. More black shirts with white stripes, and some sort of mask over their faces, holding bags with strange curvy symbols and a sign with a slash on it. Her translator told her that the sign was for money. "Bank robbers," Billy Bob said, muttering as the song began as he heard him snort. "Bank robbers dancing to money." The singing began and he started to move, but the beat was a little too slow for the filler style of dance. It didn't really fit. Then she remembered Billy Bob had listened to the song before on that record. Pink Side of the Moon? Either way, she didn't think it really fit with what they were trying to do. Indeed, once it was over, the judges stood and announced the team that was out. Now, it was just Billy Bob and the last fillers team. They were staring over at him, sizing up the final opponent. Billy Bob just grinned back at them and walked back to the prepare. As the lights came on, and the fillers team who'd just lost were arguing amongst one another over their loss. Was it the song or one of the other dancers? None of them agreed of who messed up or who were the others. Emily just giggled and waited. Crowd was all talking about Billy Bob by now, and she wondered how he'd finish up. Soon the lights flickered and everyone was waiting anxiously. "The last song shall have an occult reference," said the judge simply before everyone looked at the door. There was a sound of something creaking and then footsteps. Billy Bob was slowly walking towards the dance floor. He was wearing some sort of bright red and black jacket and red pants that his face looked different, green, as if he was dead. And he was dragging his foot as he got up to the dance floor. And the song began as he jumped to life. "It's close to midnight." He started to dance with the song moving with the time of the beat, switching between looking stiff and almost dead to moving with an incredible speed and grace. The song was creepy, about some sort of monster or dead thing hunting someone, but his dance seemed to make it seem that like he was a creature, albeit as one who could dance. When the song was over, everyone cheered out, and he smiled and moved to the side with a grin. It was the last Phyllis team then, and they came out wearing black hoods for some reason, except for one guy in the back wearing what looked like an American blue jeans. As the music began, one of the fillers in the back began to hit a small metal box with a stick. "No, the cowbell," Billy Bob murmured next to her as she looked over at him. "All our times have come." It seemed to be a strange song about something called the Reaper who collected souls. The fillers began to dance. That was a bit more human-looking, less acrobatics and more trying to move with the beat. But the one in the back was just jumping around, smacking the metal bit Billy Bob called a cowbell. Once it was over, the judges were murmuring at each other. Billy Bob was looking up, the fillers were looking up. "Dear species, we have a tie in our hands." There was gasps of surprise and Billy Bob grunted in annoyance. However, our rules dictate a tiebreaker to be a duet. Everyone looked at Billy Bob and then who pointed at Emily. "I'll use her as my partner, no sweat." Emily blinked in surprise. "What? Excellent. You have 10 minutes to prepare." The fillers racked backstage and Billy Bob pulled Emily along with him. "Billy Bob, I'm not a dancer like you." "It's okay. We'll just do the tango." He had her backstage now and shoved her into a room where the other costumes were strewn out on a table. He began to pull off the red and black thing that he had on now, wiping the green makeup off his face. "I don't know how to do that." "It's okay. Like the great Al Pacino once said, there is no mistakes in the tango. You get tangled up and tango on." He was quickly pulling his regular clothes back on, including his American flag hat. He turned back to her. "Okay. So, just step up to me." He held out his arms out a bit as she stepped up, but he was reminded that she was taller than him. His eyes were level where her collarbone should be, if she had one, but he wasn't sure if she did or not. "Damn! I forgot that you're taller than me. That's... We'll get over it. Just take my hands with yours. Top of your ones. I don't know what you should do with your lower ones. Just something. Anyway, when I whisper copy, you just do what I'm doing. Keep your feet near mine, and I'll take the lead. When I say mirror, you pretend that you're a mirror, and do what I'm doing but the opposite way. Let's try." They tried for a minute or two, and Emily stared mostly at her feet. They moved all right, but she was far from sure of her emotions. Inside the room, a buzzer that sounded as he pulled her to the door. "Okay, come on." She gasped, entirely not ready, but unable to stop him from dragging her back out to the dance floor. He scrolled through his import till he found the Fago Lento. He didn't have much in the way of tango music, but these Xenos had never heard the tango before, so it didn't matter. Once they were on the dance floor, he gripped Emily by the one hand and the other on her back so lightly, pressing against her wings as he started to dance. She pretty much just stared at her feet, trying to move with him. But even when she was a little slow, he had the strength to easily push her leg back, or pull her with him. He wasn't having the easiest of times with it, but so far Billy Bob was capable enough to keep them moving. At times he would whisper to her to mirror or copy, and she tried her best to work with the steps that he was going through, moving her legs between and around one another. The slower tempo made her feel like she was doing pretty well, but at the end he picked up with some focus that she had moved quickly. She was getting excited about being in the dance like this. Her life had been all about diplomacy and secrecy, really. She wasn't the kind of the spotlight. But here she was out in the middle of the crowd where everyone was cheering her on. She wasn't flying, but it almost felt like her spirit was, right up until B-Robbo brought her back to reality. I'm going to spin you. Beneath her mask, her eyes went wide as the human pulled out one of his arms and spun her around. The room blurred, and then he tipped her, as if she fell and caught him with one of her arms. Raising the other, the crowd cheered. They stepped off to the side, and Emily tried to get her bearings back, a little stunned from what B-Robbo had done. It had been exciting and nerve-wracking and stressful, but also fun. She'd also see if B-Robbo could teach her how to dance sometime, just for fun. For this part, he had been eyeing the massive trophy to the side of the room. He wanted to win so bad that he could taste it, but he might have to teach Emily how to dance in case this ever happened again. He'd need her to be a bit more confident if he was going to secure his victory with better competitors. Then they watched the two fellas emerge. One was wearing some sort of giant puffy dress, while the other had some strange suit on. "The frick?" B-Robbo muttered till the song began. "Well, I'm ever class high society, God's gift to the ballroom notoriety." And they began and started to dance a strange, somewhat stiff series of steps that B-Robbo dropped. They're ballroom dancing to big balls. He was in a shock as Emily was trying to understand why he seemed so shocked. It was a song singing about some sort of dance meeting called a ball, and she didn't get it. Once the song was over, the crowd cheered as well, seeing the fillers had done a decent job. The judges stood up, and as B-Robbo shook his head, "While we feel the dance itself of B-Robbo and guest were superior, the tie goes to the fillers who are having costumes in accordance with the rules." "What? That's bullcrap," B-Robbo said. He was roaring as the fillers cheered out. B-Robbo stalked forward, and Emily groaned. "You didn't say nothing about a tiebreaker. I got costumes for the other sets." The judges stood before the angry human, not seeming worried. "Rules state points will be awarded for keeping costumes according to the song set. Your last piece had no costume." "Yeah, but I should have won anyway." "Your dances were better, but a solo act also gets less." "Such crap! You know what I think about your rules?" he asked as he crossed his arms. The judges looked up at him, as he then jumped over the table, making them gasp out as he grabbed the large golden trophy behind them. It was massive, with several tiers to it. She forgot how strong he was as he just hoisted it into the air above his head with both his hands. "I think I win anyway. Emily, book it." He jumped past the crowd, and the people scattered, and the honored guards chased after him. The diplomat blinked and quickly let her wings flap as she jumped and began to fly after the human holding the trophy over his head, running and jumping for his ship. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of B-Robbo, Space Trucker. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.